طيب وصلنا إلى قول الشيخ ابن عثيمين رحمه الله مسألة رأيتموها؟ Guys see it? Page 350. طيب الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. قال الشيخ ابن عثيمين رحمه الله: مسألة: إذا قال قائل: أرأيتم لو أفطر شخص لمصلحة الغير في غير مسألة الحبلى والمرضع، مثل أن يفطر لإنقاذ غريق أو لإطفاء حريق، فهل يلزمه القضاء والإطعام؟ مسألة. Now here's an issue, a question. If someone says, if someone breaks their fast for the benefit of someone else in an issue other than pregnant and breastfeeding women. For example, someone breaks their fast in order to save someone who's drowning. Or someone breaks their fast in order to put out a fire. You're breaking your fast for the benefit of others. Do they have to do al-qada and al-it'am? Make it up and feed a poor person? Because remember, one of the reasoning that the Hanabila used for the the pregnant and breastfeeding woman, why they have to make it up and feed someone, is because they broke their fast for someone else. So if they're not pregnant or breastfeeding, do they have to do the same thing? Understood? الجواب أما على القول الذي رجحناه من أنه ليس على الحامل والمرضع إلا القضاء، فليس على المنقذ إلا القضاء. وأما على القول بوجوب القضاء والإطعام عليهما في محله ففيه قولان. القول الأول: يلزمه القضاء والإطعام قياسا على الحامل والمرضع إذا أفطرتا لمصلحة الولد. والقول الثاني: لا يلزمه إلا القضاء فقط، واستدل لذلك بأن النص إنما ورد في الحبلى والمرضع دون غيرهما. وأجيب عن هذا بأنه وإن ورد النص بذلك فالقياس في هذه المسألة تام، وهو أنه أفطر لمصلحة الغير. The answer is that according to the position, he's saying, according to the position that we chose, and that is what? Regarding pregnant and breastfeeding women, they only make it up. He said, according to the position that we chose, then in that case, the one who saves someone, breaks their fast in order to save someone, then they only have to make it up. So what about the ones who say the pregnant and breastfeeding woman must make up their day and feed someone because they broke their fast? Someone else. So what do they say now if someone breaks their fast for someone else? Someone breaks their fast and put out a fire, breaks their fast in order to save a drowning person, and whatever other example. What do they say in this case? The first position of those, they say that they have to make it up and feed a poor person. Why? Qiyas. They compared it to pregnant, the hamil and the murdi'. The second opinion among them, and of course this doesn't apply for us because we said just make it up. So the second position for them is that they don't have to feed and they only have to make it up. Qada faqat. And they said that, well, the text is only referring to pregnant and breastfeeding women. The text mentions them, we'll stick to that, and it doesn't apply to anyone else. However, The ones who said they have to do both responded to this by saying, yeah, it's true that the text mentions them specifically. However, the qiyas in this issue is complete. The qiyas in this issue is complete. Okay? Because what is the illah here? The illah, the reasoning of why the pregnant and breastfeeding women have to feed according to them? Because they broke their fast for someone else. And the qiyas here is the same thing. They broke their fast for someone else, so they must do the same thing. But as we said, this doesn't apply according to the position that we chose. يقول رحمه الله: والإفطار لمصلحة الغير له صور منها إنقاذ غريق مثل أن يسقط رجل معصوم في الماء ولا يستطيع أن يخرجه إلا بعد أن يشرب فنقول اشرب وأنقذه. Now, breaking the fast for someone else's benefit has different scenarios. You can imagine it in different ways. For example, he says, the first, saving a drowning person. He says, for example, a man whose blood is protected, ma'soom. He is ma'soom, someone whose blood and wealth and honor is protected, falls into some water. Why did he say someone who's ma'soom? You guys get it? Okay, so if someone is not ma'soom, do you have to save them? No, you don't. For example, an example where someone's blood is not ma'soom, is not protected, is in the state of war. The enemy's blood is not ma'soom. So if someone among them falls into some water, what are you going to go save them and then go back and shoot at them? Huh? So that would be someone who is not ma'soom. That's someone who is not ma'soom. The point, he says, for example, saving a drowning person. For example, a man who is ma'soom falls into some water and he's not able to get out, and you need to drink to save him, get some energy. And so he says, we say, drink and save him. Yeah, this is just examples. These are examples. الثاني يقول الثاني إطفاء الحريق كأن يقول لا أستطيع أن أطفئ الحريق حتى أشرب فنقول اشرب وأطفئ الحريق. وفي هذه الحال إذا أخرج الغريق وأطفأ الحريق هل له أن يأكل ويشرب بقية اليوم؟ الجواب نعم، له أن يأكل ويشرب بقية اليوم لأنه أذن له في فطر هذا اليوم، وإذا أذن له في فطر هذا اليوم صار هذا اليوم في حقه من الأيام التي لا يجب إمساكها فيبقى مفطرا إلى آخر النهار. Another scenario, second. Putting out what? Fire. Putting out a fire. Because when putting out a fire, how is it? Heat, dry, need energy, so on. Firefighter. If someone's a firefighter, you need this ruling. For example, he says, someone says, I'm not able to put out the fire until I drink. Okay, and there's lives at hand, and there's the property of people at stake. And so we tell him, drink and put out the fire. And so he says, in this case, if he saves the drowning person and he puts out the fire and he had broken his fast, is he allowed to eat and drink the rest of the day? I don't know if you guys remember, we mentioned something and we said, if someone is allowed to break their fast during the beginning of the day, then they can carry that out for the whole day. And we mentioned the athar of, I believe it was Ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu, where he said, whoever ate at the beginning of the day shall eat at the end of the day. Meaning if you have broken your fast for a legislated excuse, then you are not required to withhold the rest of the day. You guys remember this? We said, for example, a traveler comes back from traveling. Are they required to If a sick person broke their fast, but then they feel better, they require to. صحيح. يقول الجواب نعم. Yes, he is allowed to eat and drink the rest of the day because he was given permission to break his fast that day. And so if he was given permission to break the fast that day, then that day for him is not a day which he is obligated to withhold. And so he can stay like that till the end of the day. He can stay like that for the whole day where he has broken his fast. الثالث وكذلك لو أن شخصا احتيج إلى دمه بحيث أصيب رجل آخر بحادث ونزف دمه وقالوا إن دم هذا الصائم يصلح له وإن لم يتدارك هذا المريض قبل الغروب فإنه يموت فله أن يأذن في استخراج دمه من أجل إنقاذ المريض وفي هذه الحال يفطر بناء على القول الراجح في أن ما ساوى الحجامة فهو مثلها وسيأتي الخلاف في هذه المسألة وأن المذهب لا يفطر بإخراج الدم إلا بالحجامة فقط دون الفصل والشرط والصحيح أن ما كان بمعناها يأخذ حكمها. وهذه المسألة ستأتي إن شاء الله استخراج الدم والحجامة. Third scenario, for example, if someone's blood is needed, this is a common issue. If someone's blood is needed. For example, a man was in an accident and he lost a lot of blood. And they said the blood of that fasting person is suitable for that man. And if he is not saved before al-ghurub, then he will die. Meaning we can't delay it. He says, and so he is allowed to give permission for his blood to be taken, extracted, in order to save the person. And in this case, this is the words of the Shaykh, and in this case, his fast is broken according to the correct position, in that which is equal to hijama is similar to it. He said according to the correct position, meaning then what? There's differing. He said according to the correct, that means there's differing in this issue. And that is what the Shaykh said, the correct position. And that is that if it's something is equal to hijama, just a hijama, you're taking blood, something else you're taking blood, then they're equal. And so hijama breaks the fast, okay, then extracting blood also breaks the fast. Even though the Hanabila differentiate between hijama and other than hijama, and we're going to see why. He said, وَسَيَأْتِي الْخِلَافِ فِي هَذِهِ الْمَسَألَةِ. And the differing in this issue is going to come. And the madhab is that you don't break your fast if you take blood unless it's by hijama. They said your fast is not broken unless your blood is taken by hijama, cupping. دون الفصل والشرط. And so if you cut someone in order to extract their blood, they say it doesn't break the fast. According to who? Hanabila. The Shaykh says, and the correct position is that which is similar to it, meaning hijama takes the same ruling. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail when we get to the section about the things that break your fast. And we're going to talk about hijama and extracting blood and so on. يقول الشيخ رحمه الله تنبيه قول المؤلف رحمه الله أطعمتا لكل يوم مسكينا ظاهره أن الإطعام واجب على الحامل والمرضع وهو ظاهر أثر ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما. والمذهب أن الإطعام واجب على من تلزمه النفقة. فمثلا إذا كان الأب موجودا فالذي يطعم الأب أي أبو الطفل لا أبو المرأة، فالذي يطعم الأب لأنه هو الذي يلزمه الإنفاق على ولده دون الأم. وعلى هذا فلا نخاطب الأم إلا بالصيام فقط، وأما الإطعام فنخاطب به الأب. ولو أن الأب لم يطعم فليس على الأم في ذلك إثم. ولهذا يعتبر كلام المؤلف رحمه الله مخالفا للمذهب في هذه المسألة. وضوابط الفدية في هذه الحال نفس الضوابط التي ذكرناها في فدية الكبير والمريض، فما ذكرناه هناك ينطبق هنا. He says, now, note, تنبيه. Remember when we read the words of Al-Hajjawi and he said, they feed for every day a poor person, referring to breastfeeding women and pregnant women. Remember? The apparent meaning of this is that the pregnant and breastfeeding women themselves have to feed the poor person. Okay? And the Shaykh says, and this is the apparent meaning of the Athar of Ibn Abbas. However, the madhab is that the one who has to feed is the one who is required to support the woman and child. Okay? So the ones who say you have to the pregnant and breastfeeding have to make it up and feed someone, well, who's required to do the feeding? So he says, for example, if the father is present, the father of who? No, the father of the child, not the father of the woman. So then who feeds in that case? The father, because he's the one who's required to financially support the child. He's the one who's financially required to support the child. And the woman as well if they're married. Now, so in that case, then who do we address regarding feeding the poor person? Who is required? The father of the child. And so if the father refuses to do it, there's no sin on the mother. There's no sin on the mother, the pregnant or breastfeeding woman. And so he says that then the words of the author in this case are in opposition to the madhab. Because it seems that the words of the author are saying they themselves have to do it. And the madhab says that who has to do it? The one required to support. And the fidya in this case, feeding in this case, the conditions of the fidya or the characteristics of the fidya are the same as what we mentioned regarding, then it is the same fidya as the sick person who's not able to make up his fast. Okay? And this is all, going back, this is all applies only to the position of those who say what? You have to make it up and feed. But according to the position that the Shaykh chose and we chose, we said, just make it up and there's no feeding. قال الشيخ رحمه الله قوله ومن نوى الصوم، وهذا كلام الحجاوي، ومن نوى الصوم ثم جن أو أغمي عليه جميع النهار ولم يفق جزءا منه لم يصح صومه لا إن نام جميع النهار ويلزم المغمى عليه القضاء فقط. he says, and whoever, pay attention, and whoever intends to fast, then becomes insane or unconscious for the entire day, and does not wake up a portion of it, portion of the day, his fasting is not correct. Not, however, if he sleeps the entire day. And the unconscious one only makes it up. We got it? And whoever intends to fast then becomes insane or unconscious for the entire day and does not wake up a portion of it, his fasting is not correct. Not, however, if he sleeps the entire day, and the unconscious one only makes it up. طيب.
قال الشيخ رحمه الله: قوله فقط في عبارته هذه فيه شيء من الخلل، لأن قوله فقط يوهم أن المراد بلا إطعام، ويلزم المغمى عليه القضاء فقط، يوهم أن المراد بلا إطعام، وليس هذا هو المراد، بل المراد أن المغمى عليه من بين هؤلاء الثلاثة هو الذي يلزمه القضاء. ولهذا لو قال ويلزم المغمى عليه فقط القضاء لكان أبين.
Now the Shaykh says, his statement only, you guys see it? Right here? Statement only. In the words, in his words, he says this statement is kind of flawed. It's kind of flawed. Because we said, Hajawi, and the unconscious one only makes it up. And the unconscious one only makes it up. He says, this sentence is a bit flawed because it gives you the impression that the unconscious one is not required to feed. And the unconscious one only makes it up. He says, but this is not what is intended. What's intended is that the unconscious one, out of these three, sleeping, insane, unconscious, the unconscious one out of these three, he is the one who has to make it up only. He's the only one who has to make it up. And so he says, so if he had said, and only the unconscious one makes it up, it would have been more clear. Okay? What did Al-Hajjawi say? He said, and the unconscious one only makes it up. He's like, only makes it up? Okay, then he doesn't have to feed. Is that what's intended? No. What he intends is, and only the unconscious one makes it up. Meaning only him, out of these three, sleeping, insane, unconscious, only unconscious has to make up that day. فهمتم? It's clear?
قال هذه ثلاثة أشياء متشابهة: الجنون والإغماء والنوم، وأحكامها تختلف. أولا الجنون، فإذا جن الإنسان جميع النهار في رمضان من قبل الفجر حتى غربت الشمس فلا يصح صومه، لأنه ليس أهلا للعبادة، ومن شرط الوجوب والصحة العقل، وعلى هذا فصومه غير صحيح ولا يلزمه القضاء لأنه ليس أهلا للوجوب.
Now, first he says, or before that, he says these are three things which are similar. Insanity, sleep, unconsciousness. And their rulings differ. They're similar, but their rulings differ. The first is insanity. He says, and so if a person becomes insane for the entire nahar, day. So what's entire day when we say entire day of Ramadan? From when to when? Fajr to sunset. So if he becomes insane for the entire day, from before Fajr until the sun is set, until the sun sets, then his fasting is not correct. His fasting is not correct. Why? Nahsant. Because he's not someone who is required to carry out the worship, because one of the conditions which make it obligatory and correct is an intellect. Right? Someone doesn't have an intellect, then you are not required to carry out the forms of worship. Okay? And so he says, in this case, his fasting is not correct, and he is not required to make it up. Okay? Understood? Insane, not required to make it up, and his fasting is not correct because he is not a person who is obligated to do so. He's not a person who is obligated to carry out the obligations. So you guys understood this? Someone intends to fast before Fajr. He intended to fast, and then goes insane before Fajr time comes in, and stays insane until sunset. What does he have to do? Doesn't have to make it up. Is his fasting correct? Not correct. Fasting is not correct, and doesn't make it up. قال ثانيا المغمى عليه فإذا أغمي عليه بحادث أو مرض بعد أن تسحر جميع النهار، أي أغمي عليه جميع النهار، فلا يصح صومه لأنه ليس بعاقل ولكن يلزمه القضاء لأنه مكلف، وهذا قول جمهور العلماء. Second, unconscious person. Isn't that somewhat common these days? Unconscious, go into a coma. Allah musta'an. Unconscious person. If someone becomes unconscious due to an accident, due to sickness, after having performed suhoor, for example, for the entire day, meaning unconscious for the entire day, then his fasting is not correct. And he is required to make it up. Why? Because he's still a responsible person. He's still a responsible person. And this is the opinion of the majority of ulama. Mahu? What is it? He has to make it up. If what? He's unconscious for the entire day. For example, he has the intention to fast, falls unconscious before Fajr. Falls unconscious before Fajr, stays unconscious until the sun sets. What does he do? He has to make it up. So his fasting, is it correct or not correct? Incorrect. So his fasting is not correct. And this is the majority of the people of knowledge say this. يقول وقال صاحب الفائق أحد تلاميذ شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية ويسمى ابن قاضي الجبل، توفي سنة 71 و700، ويسمى ابن قاضي الجبل وله اختيارات جيدة جدا، قال إن المغمى عليه لا يلزمه القضاء كالإنسان الذي أغمي عليه أوقات الصلاة، فإن جمهور العلماء لا يلزمونه بالقضاء، وقال إنه لا فرق بين الصلاة والصوم. نعم، وهذا قول من؟ وهذا القول الذي ذكرناه الآن هو قول الحنفية. وقول الحنفية وهو أنه يصح صوم المغمى عليه إذا استوعب إغماؤه جميع نهار رمضان. يصح صوم المغمى عليه إذا استوعب إغماؤه جميع نهار رمضان. قول من؟ حنفية. The Sheikh says, and the author of Al-Fa'iq, and he is one of the students of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, and he is called Ibn Qadi al-Jabal, that's what they call him, Ibn Qadi al-Jabal, and he died year 771 Hijri. And he has very good positions, the Shaykh saying. He has very good positions, meaning fiqh, his positions in fiqh are very good. He says, the one who is unconscious is not required, in that case, the one who's unconscious is not required to make up the day. Not required. Just like someone who was unconscious for the time of prayer. Okay? The majority of scholars say that he doesn't have to make up the prayer. And he said that there's no difference between salah and sawm. And this is the position of the Hanafiyya. And this is the position of Al-Hanafiyya from among the madhahib. Hanafiyya. They said the fasting is correct in this case. If someone is unconscious for the entire afternoon of Ramadan and he had the intention of fasting. And he what? Had the intention of fasting. For example, someone got up, make suhoor, whatever, tending to fast, fell unconscious before Fajr, stayed unconscious for the entire day until sunset, Dhuhr. Oh, you said Maghrib? No, Maghrib. And so his fasting to the Hanafi in this case is correct. They said it's correct.
ولو فرض يقول ولو فرض أن الرجل أغمي عليه قبل أذان الفجر وأفاق بعد طلوع الشمس لصح صومه. لماذا؟ لأنه أفاق جزءا من النهار وأفاق بعد طلوع الشمس لصح صومه. وأما صلاة الفجر فلا تلزمه على القول الراجح لأنه مر عليه الوقت وهو ليس أهلا للوجوب.
So now if we take as an example someone who falls unconscious before Fajr. He woke up after sunrise and so what? Okay, did you guys get it? Someone has the intention to fast, fell unconscious before Fajr, woke up after sunrise, after the sun rose. His fasting is correct. His fasting is correct. He continues. So the Shaykh says, as for praying Fajr, then it's not a requirement according to the correct opinion, because that portion of time passed while he was not obligated to pray. Okay? He was unconscious during the whole time of Fajr, woke up after it. He's not required to make it up. He's not required to make it up. Understood?
الثالث النائم فإذا تسحر ونام من قبل أذان الفجر ولم يستيقظ إلا بعد غروب الشمس فصومه صحيح لأنه من أهل التكليف ولم يوجد ما يبطل صومه ولا قضاء عليه.
Third case, so we saw insane, unconscious, now sleeping. He says if someone, for example, had suhoor, okay, and fell asleep before Fajr Adhan. Fell asleep before Fajr Adhan. And only woke up after when? Sunset. Or woke up after Maghrib. Yani deep sleeper, okay? Some people are like that. They can sleep the whole day. So he fell asleep and he stayed asleep until Maghrib. His fasting is correct. His fasting is correct because he's still someone who's responsible. He's still someone who's responsible. and there is nothing which invalidated his fast, and so he doesn't have to make it up. Fasting is correct? Doesn't have to? Doesn't have to make it up. Of course. Salawat, of course.
قال والفرق بينه وبين المغمى عليه أن النائم إذا أوقظ يستيقظ بخلاف المغمى عليه.
نعم، فالنائم إذا نبه انتبه. النائم إذا نبه انتبه بخلاف المغمى عليه، فإنه إذا نبه لم ينتبه. المغمى عليه إذا نبه لم ينتبه، ولهذا كان المغمى عليه أشبه بالمجنون منه بالنائم. المغمى عليه أشبه بالمجنون، ولهذا كان الصحيح أن من أغمي عليه جميع النهار فإن صومه لا يصح ويجب عليه القضاء. ويجب عليه القضاء. وهذا إذا أغمي عليه جميع النهار كما قلنا، نوى ثم أغمي عليه جميع النهار. وأما من أغمي عليه جميع الشهر، شهر رمضان، ثم أفاق بعد انقضاء الشهر، فإنه يجب عليه القضاء بالإجماع. فإنه يجب عليه القضاء في هذه الحال بالإجماع. The Sheikh says, and the difference between someone who's sleeping and someone who's unconscious. Why did we say the unconscious person has to? What? Make it up. Fasting not correct. The sleeping person, his fasting is correct. He says the difference is that the one who's unconscious is that if he is alerted, if you wake him up, then he doesn't wake up. As for the sleeping person, if you wake them up and alert them, then they wake up, they come back to their senses. And so that's the difference. The sleeping person, when you try to alert them, they become alert. And the unconscious one, if you try to wake them up, then they don't wake up. And so that's why the unconscious one is more similar to the insane one than the sleeping one. That's why the unconscious one is more similar to the insane one than the sleeping one. And so that's why we say the correct position in this case, and that is if someone is unconscious for the entire day of Ramadan, then they have to make up that day. They have to make up that day. However, so this is if someone is unconscious, understand this. They intended to fast, they fell unconscious for the entire day. And then only woke up, Allahu A'lam, one, after Maghrib, the point. That's if someone is unconscious for the entire day. What if someone is unconscious for the entire month of Ramadan? Doesn't that happen? What if someone is unconscious for the entire month of Ramadan and then only woke up after the month ended? Then, in that case, he is required to make up the days by consensus. He is required to make up the days by consensus. Ijma'. Now, if he is unconscious for the whole month, before we move on. Of course. Consensus. Consensus means everyone. Yes. Very good question, and that's what came in my mind while I was preparing this. And I went to the books of the Hanafiya. Why did they differentiate between these? Understood? Why is it a consensus in one case, and then it's what? And then it's a different ruling in the other case. I found in some of the books of the Hanafis, it's because the person is not able to renew their intention. Okay? Because they had the intention when they were out for the entire day. They had the intention to fast, and then they were out for the entire day, then they woke up. But someone who's out for the entire month, they can't renew their intention every day. And one of the conditions to them is to renew your intention for each day. طيب. Now, الشيخ هناك جملة من كلام الحجاوي نبه عليها الشيخ ولم يشرحها، وهي قوله ولم يفق جزءا منه لم يصح صومه. فهم من كلامه رحمه الله أن المجنون أو المغمى عليه إن أفاق جزءا من النهار صح صومه. أن المجنون أو المغمى عليه إن أفاق جزءا من النهار صح صومه. أليس كذلك؟ بلى، الأمر كذلك. قال ابن قدامة رحمه الله: ومتى أفاق المغمى عليه في جزء من النهار صح صومه سواء كان في أوله أو آخره. انتهى كلامه رحمه الله. Now there's a statement that Al-Hajjawi mentioned that the Sheikh here didn't explain, even though he kind of alluded to it, but he didn't explain it. And that is when Al-Hajjawi said, and does not wake up a portion of it, his fasting is not correct. And does not wake up a portion of it. That statement right there. And whoever intends to fast then becomes insane or unconscious for an entire day and does not wake up a portion of it, his fasting is not correct. It's understood from his words that a insane person or unconscious person, if they do wake up a portion of it, then their fasting is valid. Right? Isn't that understood from his words? And that is a correct understanding. That is correct. Ibn Qudamah rahimahullah said, and whenever a unconscious person, and this also includes insane, whenever an unconscious person wakes up for a portion of the day, his fasting is correct, regardless of whether it's in the beginning of the day or the end of the day. Understood? So someone is unconscious and then they wake up for a small portion of the day and then they're unconscious again. Is the fasting correct? Yes, it's correct. When we say the unconscious person has to make up the day, it's when what? Unconscious for the entire day. And the insane person, when they're insane for the entire day, then their fasting is not correct. However, they do not have to make it up. Understood? طيب. قال الشيخ قوله ويجب تعيين النية. You see the words of Hajjawi up there? And it's an obligation to specify the intention. ويجب تعيين النية. قوله ويجب تعيين النية والإرادة والقصد معناها واحد، فقصد الشيء يعني نيته، وإرادة الشيء يعني نيته، والنية لا يمكن أن تتخلف عن عمل اختياري، يعني أن كل عمل يعمله الإنسان مختارا فإنه لا بد فيه من نية. ولهذا قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عليه الصلاة والسلام إنما الأعمال بالنيات، يعني أنه لا عمل بلا نية. حتى قال يعني أنه لا عمل بلا نية أي كل عمل له نية، كل عمل له نية. حتى قال بعض العلماء لو كلفنا الله عملا بلا نية لكان من تكليف ما لا يطاق،
يعني لو قال الله لنا توضؤوا بلا نية أو صلوا بلا نية أو صوموا بلا نية أو حجوا بلا نية لكان هذا من تكليف ما لا يطاق. فمن يطيق أن يفعل فعلا مختارا ولا ينوي. ويجب تعيين النية, and it is an obligation to specify the intention. The Shaykh says النية or al-irada or al-qasd are one in meaning. These terms are one in meanings. And so if you are intend something or you want something or you're seeking something, then it's all referring to the same thing, and that is your intention. And he says intention cannot be, it always accompanies a voluntary action. Intention will always accompany a voluntary action. Meaning every person who does something voluntarily, then there must be a niyyah. There must be an intention behind it. صح? Right? Must be an intention behind every voluntary action. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Meaning, there is no action without an intention. There is no action without an intention. Meaning that every action has an intention. Every action has an intention. He says, to the point that some of the ulama said, if Allah had ordered us to do an action without an intention, then it would be something we wouldn't be able to do. We don't even have the ability to do that. To do what? Carry out. He says, for example, if Allah told us, make wudu without intention. What did he say? Pray without intention. Fast without intention. Make hajj without an intention. Then this would be a burden that we could not bear. It would be a burden that cannot be bared. And so he says, and so who's able to do a voluntary action without intending anything? And can you do a voluntary action without having an intention to do that voluntary action? Is that possible? It's not possible. He says, وَبِذَلِكَ نَعْرِفْ أَنَّ مَا يَحْصُلُ لِبَعْضِ النَّاسِ مِنَ الْوَسْوَاسِ حيث يقول أنا ما نويت لم تحضر النية لم استحضر النية أنه وهم لا حقيقة له وكيف يصح أنه لم ينوي وقد فعل. كيف يصح أنه لم ينوي وقد فعل. بالمناسبة مرة دخلت مسجدا لصلاة الظهر, فوقفت في الصف وكان الإمام في الركعة الأولى, فدخل معي رجل عن يساري, فلما أراد أن يكبر رفع يديه وكاد أن يبلغ منكبيه ثم رد يديه بسرعة, ثم فعل مرة ثانية, يعني حاول أن يكبر تكبيرة الإحرام ثم رد يديه, ثم حاول مرة ثانية ورد يديه, وظل كذلك يتردد في تكبيرة الإحرام حتى ركع الإمام, فكبر بسرعة وركع. فلما قضيت الصلاة قلت له يعني إيش هذا الذي كنت تفعله, يعني نيتك تحاول تستحضر النية؟ قال نعم نية, يعني يعالج نيته, والله المستعان, هذا وسواس. طب أنت لماذا جئت إلى المسجد؟ لماذا جئت إلى المسجد؟ لماذا توضأت؟ لماذا خرجت من بيتك؟ هذا يعني لم تحضر النية. هذا كله كما قلنا من الوسواس. He says, and so we know by this is that this which happens to some people when they say, oh, I didn't get the intention.
I didn't get the intention that this is waswas. These are just whispers. And it is delusion. Shaykh says delusion. You're being delusional. You're being delusional. How can you do something without having an intention? And one time I went to a masjid for Salat al-Dhuhr, and I stood in the row, and someone on my left stood with me. We came in together. And when he wanted to do Takbirat al-Ihram, he lifted his hands almost to his shoulders, and then he put them down quick. And then he did it again, and then he was like, well, like that, just put his hands. And he stayed like that in the first rak'ah, trying to get Takbirat al-Ihram, until the Imam made ruku'. And then when the Imam made ruku' and the Imam was about to get up from ruku', he said, Allahu Akbar, and he just went down real quick. So when the salah was over, I told him, Yani, what were you doing, Yani? What was that what you were doing before the salah? Yani, is it a problem with your intention? Like, are you trying to get the intention? He said, yeah. He's trying to struggle to get the intention. And this is waswas. This is waswas. Allah al-Musta'an. Yani, what are you talking about trying to get the intention? Why did you leave your house? Why did you leave your house? Why did you come to the masjid? I left my house to go pray. I had to go pray. Why did you make wudu? What were you thinking when you heard the adhan? All that is intentions. And so when someone trying to get the intention, this is all waswas and takalluf. The Shaykh says, وذكروا عن ابن عقيل رحمه الله وهو من المتكلمين والفقهاء أنه جاءه رجل فقال له يا شيخ إنني أغتسل في نهر دجلة ثم أخرج وأرى أنني لم أطهر فقال له ابن عقيل لا تصلي لا تصلي فقال كيف؟ قال نعم لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال رفع القلم عن 3 وذكر منهم عن المجنون حتى يفيق وأنت تذهب إلى دجلة وتنغمس فيه وتغتسل من الجنابة ثم تخرج وترى أنك ما تطهرت هذا الجنون فارتدع الرجل عن هذا. He says, and they also mention about Ibn Aqil rahimahullah, and he is one of the mutakallimin who is also a faqih, that a man came to him and told him, Ya Shaykh, I go and make ghusl in the river of Dijla, what do they call it? Tigris, whatever. Tigris. He says, I go and make ghusl in the river of the Tigris River. And then I come out and I feel like I still haven't gotten tahara. Imagine, in a river. He said, I feel like I still didn't get the tahara. And so Ibn Aqil told him, don't pray. Meaning you don't have to pray anymore. He said, why? He said, because the Prophet ﷺ said the pen has been lifted from 3 people, and from them is the crazy one until he wakes up. The insane one until he's sane again. And you go to a Dijla river, and you dip yourself in it, and you make ghusl from janaba, and you leave and you still feel that you haven't purified yourself. He said, this is insanity. And so the man desisted from his actions. طيب. قال رحمه الله فإن قيل ما هي النية؟ ما هي النية؟ فالجواب النية تختلف، ولهذا قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. وبهذا التقرير يتبين أن الجملتين في الحديث ليس معناهما واحدا. If someone says now, and so what is the intention then? What is the intention? What do I intend? The answer, he says, is that intentions differ, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said,
إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. And through this, it's established that these two sentences in the hadith do not have the same meaning. The two sentences in the hadith do not have the same meaning. يريد الشيخ رحمه الله أن قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما الأعمال بالنيات وقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى ليس من باب التوكيد بل الجملة الثانية معناها يختلف عن الجملة الأولى. فما الفرق بينهما إذن؟ قال الشيخ رحمه الله في شرحه للحديث كما في شرحه للأربعين النووية قال فالأولى باعتبار المنوي وهو العمل والثانية باعتبار المنوي له وهو المعمول له. انتهى كلامه. أي كل عمل اختياري فله نية. ثم إن حظك من عملك بحسب نيتك. أي ما هو العمل الذي تقصده، ما هو العمل الذي تريده، ثم ما هي غايتك من هذا العمل. إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. He said, and so we understand that the two sentences in the hadith, the meaning is not the same. So the Shaykh intends here, rahimahullah, that the statement of the Messenger, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ and إِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى are not one and the same. It's not repetitive. The second sentence is not emphasizing the first sentence. Rather, the second statement has a different meaning from the first statement. Well then, what is the meaning? What is the difference between these two then? The Shaykh rahimahullah said in his explanation of Al-Arba'in al-Nawawiyya, he said, and so the first one is as it relates to the action. First statement is as it relates to the action, and the second is as it relates to what you are intending, meaning what you are doing the action for. Understand the difference? Meaning, every voluntary action has an intention. However, your share of your action is according to your intention. In other words, what is the specific action that you are intending? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. What is the action that you want? وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. And what is your goal? What are you seeking from that action? Understood? Understood? Final sentence. قوله ويجب تعيين النية أفادنا بهذه العبارة أن النية واجبة وأنه يجب تعيينها أيضا فينوي الصيام عن رمضان أو عن كفارة أو عن نذر أو ما أشبه ذلك. فلا يصح الصوم إذن بلا نية. لا يصح الصوم بلا نية. والصيام ليس مجرد الإمساك بل هو إمساك بنية. إمساك بنية كما في الحديث القدسي يدع طعامه وشرابه من أجلي. يدع طعامه وشرابه من أجلي. إمساك بنية. طيب, final sentence, and we finish with this. His statement, وَيَجِبُ تَعْيِينُ النِّيَّةِ, and it's an obligation to specify the intention. It's an obligation to specify the intention. He informs us through this statement that the intention is an obligation. That the intention, an obligation. And that it is an obligation to specify it. What does it mean, specify it?
Meaning, what action are you doing? When you have the intention to fast. Okay, fast what? Are you fasting an expiation for something? Are you fasting for expiation of an oath, expiation of dhihar? Are you fasting a nadhr, a vow? What is it? Is it Ramadan? What action are you intending? So it's an obligation to specify. So you have to have the intention, fasting Ramadan, that I am then fasting Ramadan. He says, and so you intend, you're fasting Ramadan or a expiation or for a vow or whatever. And so then fasting is not correct except with an intention. Fasting is not correct except with an intention. Because fasting is not just refraining from the things that break your fast. Is that what fasting is? No, it's refraining paired with an intention. These are the two pillars of fasting. Imsak, niyya. You're refraining from the mufattirat with the intention. With an intention. And one of the hadith that prove that is the hadith Qudusi, where Allah Azza wa Jal said, He leaves His food and drink for my sake. Leaves food and drink, imsak. For my sake, niyya. Clear? ونكمل في الأسبوع القادم إن شاء الله تعالى. صلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.